Hello, and welcome to NIDA Awareness Week 2021. I'm Misha. I am a non-binary actor, filmmaker, and LGBTQIA+ activist. My pronouns are they, them. I am definitely reading from a script because I want to get this right. I'll be moderating today's panel, Proud to be Me, Insights from the LGBTQIA+ community. Before we dive in, I'd like to get actually kind of real about how this panel came about. One of the most detrimental issues that exist in the eating disorder community is the lack of authentic representation and diversity. From accurate research studies to affordable treatment options, it's very difficult often for a widespread community and communities of many kinds to have access to the mental health care that they need, especially when it comes to eating disorder and eating disorder treatment. So the theme of NIDA Awareness Week this year is Everybody Has a Seat at the Table. Through conversations like the panel today, NIDA aims to actively address these issues and hopefully spark some meaningful change, especially when it comes to inclusion, diversity, and authentic representation. So we would like to thank Eating Disorder Recovery Center for sponsoring this important event. And I would also like to thank Video Out, I love them, for their continued partnership and support. And without further ado, let's introduce some panelists. First, we have James Rose. James is an actor, fitness professional, podcaster, and Instagram educator. James is also a Health at Every Size personal trainer and a trauma-informed yoga teacher, specializing in accessible fitness that creates space for all people to make peace with movement and their bodies. James's pronouns are they, them. Hi, James.
Hi.
Following that, we have Jen Ponton. Jen is an award-winning actress and body liberation activist. Jen is most known as the fiercely feminist fat activist Ruby on AMC's critical darling Dietland. In 2020, she delivered the TEDx talk Hollywood's Fat Phobia Problem. She is also the host of the podcast called All the... Hello, Jen.
Hi, guys.
And Jen's pronouns are she, her. Next, we have Lynaé, aka Thoughtress. Lynaé is a Black, queer, non-binary poet, actor, comedian, host, and a producer whose artistry focuses on breaking down the code of silence tangled around their Blackness and finding ways to use their experiences to build community. Some of their notable features include Harlem Pride, Poetic Theater Productions, New York Theater Workshop, Poetry Cabaret, We Are Trans, NWUF, and Revealing Roots. Hi, Lynaé.
Hi, everyone.
Lynaé's pronouns are they, them. And finally, we have Eric Dorsa. Eric serves as a Recovery Ambassador Council member for Eating Disorder Recovery Center. Eric is an LGBTQ advocate, actor, comedian, and drag queen. Eric has been featured on Texas Public Radio Worth Repeating, Mental Note podcast Drag Queen Wisdom, Huffington Post Queer Voices, and has given an award-winning 2014 TEDx talk entitled How Dressing in Drag Made Me Uncover My Authentic Self. Eric's pronouns are they, them. Hi, Eric.
Hello, everybody.
Those are our panelists for today. I'm so excited for this conversation, so let's just dive right in.
Let's do it.
So first of all, thank you all so much for being here today. It really means a lot. And I know that we can only be in the digital room together, but thank you for joining us in this digital room.
Thanks, Misha.
So, yeah, it's time. Right off the bat, the theme for this year's NIDA Awareness Week is Everybody Has a Seat at the Table. And like I just said, that is in an effort to include voices and thoughts and opinions and points of view that haven't been really broadcasted and included, especially when it comes to eating disorder awareness and eating disorder treatment and recovery. So what does having a seat at the table mean to you? Obviously in a proverbial sense, but you know, having a seat at this conversation table. And especially when you're thinking about mental health care access for all communities and eating disorder awareness and treatment, what does having a seat at the table mean to you? I'd love to start with James. Go for it.
Having a seat at the table to me means having the experiences and the individual intersections of our identities being the things that are honored in the highest regard in the conversations surrounding affirmative care or around mental health. I notice that so often when we have conversations about mental health, specifically in eating disorders, they tend to skew cis, white, thin women with anorexia nervosa, which is absolutely an incredibly at-risk group of people. It is also not the group of people that is the entire experience of an eating disorder, right? We know that basically every intersection of identity can experience this and does. And sometimes the intersections of your identity are what make you even more at risk to developing an eating disorder, engaging in disordered eating, falling victim to diet culture. And so to me, having a seat at the table is not so much about just like, oh, we have a trans person in the room. Oh, we have somebody who's disabled in the room. Oh, we have, a fat person in the room. It's how are we centering the justice surrounding these disorders around the people who are most affected by them? How are we centering them around the fat, Black, trans, disabled, non-binary person? That's what I think having a seat at the table means.
Amazing. Lynaé, do you have anything to add to that when it comes to having a seat at the table?
For me, having a seat at the table, one automatically disproves the myth that eating disorders is solely a white person's problem. It's not. But I was told that a lot, even by family members. And so for me, it's representing that, no, it affects all of us. And we're all valid in what we're going through, and we all deserve to be seen and to be heard. And so having a seat at the table for me means, not having to deal with the gatekeeping of who looks the part well enough to be considered someone with an eating disorder. Yeah, that's what it means for me.
Amazing. Jem, what are your thoughts on that, having a seat at the table?
Lynaé really summed it up perfectly to me, and I think also as an overarching umbrella, it's the focus of care and worth. So it's enveloping these marginalized identities who are absolutely all the more at risk because they're more likely to go under the radar and more likely to be ignored and to be gaslit by family and medical professionals. But it's really truly care, and I think that it's a microcosm of that in the eating disorder community, but it's also the impacts that has on healthcare and equality in the world are so vast.
Absolutely. And and this is kind of like forwarding and like moving forward a bit on this same question, but what has been your experience working towards either recovery from an eating disorder or coming to peace with your body and your body image, especially when it comes to your queer identity, and how does your queer identity inform your relationship to your body and your relationship to eating disorder wellness and healthcare? Eric, do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I always tell people that my fundamental root of body image comes from the trauma and the lack of safety I felt in a queer body and a queer identity. And so much of my eating disorder was about trying to find invisibility for a sense of safety. In my culture and my family, being Latinx, there were so many expectations of gender roles. And when I naturally did not fit in and feed those ideas, those expectations, it put a very intense target on my back. So I do think that my gender identity expression, my sexuality very much inform my body. And so much of coming out and embracing my identity has been about living more in my body, a body with desires, a body with sexuality, a body that deserves autonomy and safety and can exist with a queer identity. And I couldn't do one without the other. Absolutely. It started with, okay, I need help with my eating disorder. And then it really evolved pretty rapidly into, oh, this is a lot of trauma.
I love that you put it that way, because there's such an element of healing and community and self-love that can come from accepting your queerness. I know for me, like accepting a non-binary identity was so healing when it came to body image and being able to love my body that much more. But there's also inherent trauma that comes with growing up queer, because queer is being in the other. So it goes from having that target on your back to celebrating being in the other. That was really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Moving right along. So getting more directly into that question, do you feel like your queer identity has affected your ability to receive treatment or healthcare, or has affected the resources that are available to you when it comes to healing from an eating disorder and healing from distorted body image? Lynaé, what are your thoughts?
Definitely. I honestly, it's hard enough going to the doctor and just being Black and then being non-binary. And if I'm not dismissed because I'm Black and I'm not consistently misgendered to the point where I just want to hide under the covers and just go home and deal with it myself, then it's like, okay, will I be heard and validated? And this other part of me, every time I go to the doctor, I have to mention that I have an eating disorder, because part of the treatment that I was on before was just a very quick, like, hey, don't tell me my weight when I get on the scale. That's why I step on the scale backwards. I know which way to step on the scale. I've been doing this since I was a child. Every single time it's in my chart in all caps. Every single time I go, they always tell me my weight, or they assume that I don't want to know because they see me as female and then assume that I have some, like, it's always like, oh, yeah, come on, your weight is fine, girl, you're good. And it's like, wow, first of all, not girl. Second of all, that's not my eating disorder is not a, like, it's not a fashion trend. This is my real life. This is my health. This puts my health at risk every single day of my life. Like, please take it serious. But it's so hard just getting past even the most basic level of care to be able to get to the point of, like, hey, can you also please take this serious? Because if you don't, when I walk out of here for routine care, I'm now having to deal with possibly spiraling out on my own in a way that I can't come back to you and hope to get help. So, yeah, for me, it's like a constant battle, constant struggle, and really having to mentally prepare myself, psychologically prepare myself when I go to seek even just basic medical care, and hoping that every part of me is taken serious enough for me to get the care that I need.
It almost sounds like going to war. You're kind of preparing for battle just to receive healthcare that you need. James, I'd love you to chime in on this, only because, I mean, I adore you and I adore the way that you approach particularly social media in such an inclusive and also not just body positive, but in a body informative way. So could you talk a little bit about what your views are when it comes to queerness and healthcare for eating disorders?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I want to name something that I learned recently, and that like the way the body positive narrative has been so distorted has like started to center like thin white women, and I think Jen could speak on this more. But what I want to name is that like I'm more engaged now in fat liberation. Like that is what the name of the game is now, and like that's something that I learned by misstepping. And like, just to go into that for a second, like I used to be one of the people who like posted pictures of my body to get likes. You know what I mean? Because like I exist in a body that is thin and white and privileged in the gay male circuit, and also by women because I happen to like fit like what the fashion models look like. And so with those two things going at the same time, in a similar vein to what Lynaé was speaking about, it's like being gaslit for your experiences. It's like, you're fine, you're beautiful, everyone wants to be you. And it's like, actually, that's not what it looks like. And I think the fallacy of the media narrative is that like thin equals happy, and that's absolute crap. Like, that's not true. And like, the idea that we should even be centering that narrative or like even giving it the credence is just shows how ridiculous we've taken this in a direction. So for me, was the question about access to care? Was that where we were going with this?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, because I did not understand my gender identity, I did not have the language surrounding it. I didn't realize that I was experiencing a struggle and like an internal tug of war about who I was. I didn't know how to ask for affirmative care. And so like when we think about like, okay, so now it's like I know that I need to go in and be gendered correctly, like Lynaé was speaking about, like that's a huge part of it. But before I was caught between like being privileged in the insta-gay world for like being a thin, gay, cute twink, and then I was like being privileged in like the musical theater space because I looked like a rockette. And like, well, both of those things haven't changed. I still think I'm cute, but everyone's cute. So like, let's just name that too. And I was like, well, I don't know what to want here. Like, all I know is that my relationship with food is a mess. And I didn't realize that it was because I was trying to fit two unrealistic body standards that were so gendered. I was trying to gain weight and like bulk up to look like the hot guys that like I wanted to do. And then I was also trying to like be slim like the Rockettes so I could be one, you know? Neither one of those things are even my gender to begin with. I'm not a man or a woman. So like, how was I supposed to walk into someone's office and say, I would like you to refer to me this way, and I would like to look at like how my gender has affected my eating disorder, because body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria are two different things. But I guarantee you, like, if you're watching this, go poll 5 clinicians and see if any of them can give you a concrete difference between the two, because I guarantee you, you'll be disappointed with the answer. And that's the problem. It's like, without growing up in a world where my gender is affirmed, like, how was I even supposed to know to ask for that healthcare to begin with when it's not even something that I knew myself?
That was so beautifully put, and I don't want to put too fine a point on it because I feel like Jen has thoughts that I definitely want to hear. But I do want to bring up something that I passionately believe that you just brought up, which is that vocabulary is everything. I similarly experienced that growing up as a queer human in a body that I didn't understand, that I was at war with when it came to eating disorders and body image and distorted body image. I wish fervently that I had growing up the vocabulary, even as simple as I don't like what I see in the mirror, or I don't like the clothes that I'm being told to buy. Because I do believe that, yes, medical professionals need far more vocabulary when it comes to treating folks that fall outside of the gender binary, et cetera, when it comes to eating disorders. But if I, as a child, if children in general had very simple, accessible vocabulary, I do believe mental health care, especially when it comes to the realm of mental health care, would be much further along. So thank you for bringing that up, James. That's brilliant. Jen, talk to us.
Oh my gosh. First of all, James, that was so beautiful. Thank you. I do feel like I do feel like as the only cisgender person in this group, I want to really be quite deferential to the gender dysphoria that you all experience in the world, specifically in medical care, and specifically with the absolute stubborn seeming inability of medical professionals to be respectful and to validate and see and treat you as you should be treated. That's huge and must be incredibly difficult. My gendered experiences in medicine are more cis in nature, definitely misogynistic, and definitely fat phobic by far and away. I have had physicians completely ignore my ED details in my charts and talk to me about my weight, and then also suggest that I go on diets, and then also suggest, a punitive exercise. And they do it in the room, and they do it after I was there 6 months ago and traumatized and cried all the way home in my car, and then called the office to say, hi there, I'm really going to need you to tell Dr. So-and-so to pay attention to my chart, and whatever you have to do, highlight it, underline it, bold it, put it in wingdings. I don't care. Make sure that is visible and at the very top of whatever they see. And again, looking at my privilege, looking at the fact that I am a small fat, I am cisgender, I'm white, I shudder to think about how that behavior is going to impact someone who is more marginalized and someone who does not have the advantages that I have just innately to my mental health, because I'm not fighting those hills as well. I'm not fighting those battles. And it just becomes clearly so much when you are and when you do. So I think again, just this overall idea of care and validation and treating people like humans is so key. And it's the through line that I'm hearing across our experiences with race and gender and obviously bodies of all sizes and shapes. Like, if you go into these places and you are not recognized and you're not treated like a human being, that's just a microcosm of all of the other horrors that await you in the world, all of the battles that we're fighting. And it's almost no more important than it is in the doctor's office, because that's ultimately like your wellness. Are you going to be around tomorrow? Are you going to be around to fight next week, next month, next year? And until medical access becomes as compassionate and validating and humanizing as it should be, how is anyone supposed to show up? How are we supposed to expect anyone to show up with full strength to work for all of the other things that need fixing?
Absolutely. And I like I said earlier, I have such a brain crush on all of you for the way that you're speaking about these issues, but it's just so surprising to me that we are speaking about things that seem large and grand, like validation and identity and ability to feel comfortable in the office. But at the end of the day, all that comes down to is treating mental health care like healthcare, because it is. It's all the same. So why should a doctor? You should never have the experience in the first place of having to call the doctor's office to say that you were traumatized, but certainly not a second time around after they've been informed. So thank you, Jen. Eric, what's your experience been like with healthcare around eating disorders as a queer human?
It's very interesting. I come from a very poor family in Texas. We did not have money for mental health care. I'm here today in recovery because I received treatment for free for 3 years. That's just the truth. I did not have any of the privileges to even access the eating disorder space. And one of the things that I'll say is there's something so I didn't know what validation was until I got it. I had just been so used to living and functioning and trying to find a way, and so much in validation. When I was first diagnosed with an eating disorder in Texas, the doctor said, "This is a misdiagnosis. Boys don't get eating disorders." So I was just going in and out of medical facilities for this, that, and the other. It was really traumatizing. So what I can say is unfortunately, I find what is happening is it's more and more us learning how to advocate for ourselves that is bringing about that needed education, when it should be coming from the professionals. That you look at this and look at the statistics. The statistics are so high for mental health and LGBTQIA people and people of color because they're not being addressed. They're going to stay high. That's just the truth until we begin to really, I think it all ties back to actually having a seat at the table. It's one thing to invite someone, it's another thing to give them a voice. And it's quite another thing to realize that you're in their home and they're hosting the party. So you need to sit down and listen. Like, those are very different things. And I find that the more we can allow marginalized identities to actually host and recognize that you're in their sacred space, the sooner these issues will get addressed.
That's a really beautiful way to put it. And it's so funny how meta that got so quickly, because we here are sitting at a panel created and curated by the National Eating Disorders Association, because one of the largest organizations for eating disorders in the US has decided that it truly is time to give an authentic space and platform and representation to folks that need to talk about mental health care just as much as any other group. So it is such a top-down situation. Like, if the folks at the very top that are controlling how much healthcare costs, how much healthcare is advertised, how much healthcare is easily accessible to, don't see queer people as anything more than, at the end of the day, somebody to give a nod to, then of course we're never going to receive the healthcare that we need, because we need not just a seat at the table, but, like you put it, sometimes to literally host the party. Because, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be as articulate as you, and I don't know that I can be. So bravo.
You are, and you're such a beautiful host.
You are.
Stop it.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
I would love for the default in healthcare to be that everyone has disordered eating. It may not be an eating disorder, but can you find a single person in your life that has never had a disrupted relationship with food? Name me one. They don't exist.
My dog.
Your dog, because your dog doesn't get to consume media that's like, look at this girl, yes,
Look
my
at
belly
this
rolls
pug.
are brave, it's like because she's a stick figure. It's like no, it needs to be the default, just in the way that everyone experiences trauma. One of those traumas is living in a diet culture. And I think that medical professionals often don't understand that, because they're perpetuating the very culture. Like, if Jen is walking in and being told to go on a diet, that means that the very people that are supposed to be helping us, perhaps to no fault of their own, because we all live in this culture, right? We're all victimized by it. We're all oppressed by it. Don't understand that they are part of the problem. And so this is an invitation to be part of the solution. This is not the hammer on your head that's like, fix it. It is, but it's also the invitation to say you have the power to be part of the solution. And one of those ways is, by the default, is that everybody has a disrupted relationship with food, besides Eric's dog, who I want to be in my next life.
You're
That's
welcome.
agreed. I wish I was better read on the quote that I'm about to bring up, but I do. And James, it might have even come across from your social media, but I recently scrolled past an article that put forward the idea that we should be treating America like America has an eating disorder. And I think that's a really, albeit blunt, but kind of interesting way to put it, because at the end of the day, we live in a capitalist, advertising-driven, profit-based society that not only has a myriad of issues when it comes to queer representation, when it comes to racial representation and inclusion, but it's also geared towards making you feel inherent shame for being yourself. That's how diet advertising works. You are inherently wrong, therefore fix yourself. So yeah, I think America in a lot of ways has an eating disorder. I think it's a good way to put it.
Totally.
Isn't this
I
so
think it has
fun?
a lot of disorders. I do. Yeah,
Fair enough. Fair enough. So actually, I naturally segued in a way that I wasn't expecting to. So good on you, Misha.
Yeah, you did.
But thank you. Okay, so how has lack of representation perpetuated stereotypes about eating disorders? This is a whole big ass can of worms. I just cursed. I hope that's okay. Lynaé, what do you think about stereotypes with eating disorders?
Oh gosh. Uh, where to start? Yeah, it's a can of worms. I think body type is a big thing that's not considered. I know that I don't want to say friends, people who I have told that I have an eating disorder. Some people I thought were friends that I was like, maybe not anymore. Who there's always, I feel like anytime I disclose that I have an eating disorder, there's always a moment of I get the once over. And then it's a decision that someone else gets to make about whether or not my body fits what they think of as an eating disorder. Before we even get to what type of eating disorder, there have been so many times where it's like, oh, you don't look, you've been missing any meals. Or, oh, your butt's too big to have an eating disorder, or, but look at those thighs. And it's just like dissecting every part of my body, which is like, wow, one, why did I think it was safe to tell this person? Two, what we all have our own body. We're all, genetics play a part in this, but not everyone looks, and this was part of what blocked me from being able to seek out treatment for myself, because no one came to me and said, hey, I got the poking and teasing of like, oh, I think, I think you're anorexic, but I never did. No one ever went farther than the joke to say like, we need to treat you for this. And part of what blocked me for so long from saying, okay, I think I need to get help, was looking at the representation of an eating disorder. And it was always, looking at someone who was skin and bones, and they're in the hospital and they're getting their treatment. And I'm like, okay, well, unless I reach that point, maybe I don't have an eating disorder. Maybe I'm fine. Maybe I'm fine. Let me just keep doing what I'm doing. Or I somehow am not, it's like this mental part of having an eating disorder where it's like, maybe I'm failing at my own eating disorder, which is a very dangerous thought, but it comes up a lot. And the media really perpetuates on that. And I really wish it would stop, where you start to feel like, well, like for me, I have a combination of, because the language keeps changing and I wish we even would nail down the language, I have a combination of anorexia and bulimia. It's like, if I don't get to that point, then I'm not worthy of treatment. If I don't get to that point, then I'm not in like the all-star level of, this eating disorder in order to be the face of it. So I hide and I keep to myself, and I go, well, maybe I just deal with it on my own. Maybe I just figured it out on my own. Maybe, maybe I'm not, maybe I don't have it as bad as I think I do. And I don't want to take up space in the treatment arena in order to take care of this. So I think like, I don't know what mine looks like on a personal level. When I look in the mirror, I like, that's one of the hardest things that I've had to come to terms with, is that I do not, there's never been a point in my life where I've truly known what my body looks like. I don't know. I know what I see. I've gotten far enough in treatment to know that what I see is not always the truth, but I don't know when it is true, when it's not true. All I know is how other people look at me or react to my body. But I can't do that. I can't rely on that and also get better. So it's just like, it's a big tornado cycle of like, who, I guess in the same way of like being an artist, like who tells you you're an artist? It's like, at what, like, who tells me that I have an eating disorder enough to have an eating disorder and therefore get treated, and therefore be treated as such, and be treated as if it's serious enough for me to be saved? Can I save myself? Am I equipped enough to save myself? At what point does anyone pay attention? And if they're not going to pay attention, then what do I do if I don't fit this image? Especially those, I won't even get into that. I mean, I see a lot of like now it's like it's spilled over into the fitness world of a lot of like I am legitimate because I used to have an eating disorder, and now I am like on this whole fitness plan and I can get you fit too. And it's like, first of all, what do you mean used to? It's like, what? I don't like, I'm not gonna knock anyone's process, but like, I don't, when it comes to mental health, I don't think there is a used to. I don't think that there's a way you get to pack things up and put them in the closet and pretend they don't exist anymore. And two, it's like, now this person has also become the face in this way where it's like, I'm sitting here every day struggling, trying to work out. I had gotten a good gym regimen and then the pandemic hit. Exercise has been my biggest hurdle. But then now we have fitness people who are like, no, you can do it too, and it's easy. And I used to have an eating disorder, and now I'm great. And I'm like, I'm still super thin, but I'm like, I'm fit, and you need to be like me. And it's like, wait, no, because for the rest of us, like, I don't want to knock your journey, but like, realize that you are also drowning the rest of us who don't fit this like new image of like superhuman fitness guru, eating disorder survivor / I no longer have an eating disorder. Yeah, it's a whole can of worms. I'll stop there. It's a whole
No, I mean, all of us are sitting here listening because you're bringing up all of the worms in that can that are so incredibly important. I've already latched on to two things in what you said that I couldn't agree more with. And one is, I personally believe that eating disorder recovery is an everyday thing. I literally made a film about it, and it's titled Every Day for a reason. It's because every single day, I personally make an active decision to engage with recovery. And there are days when I relapse, and there are days when I know all of us struggle. And to view recovery in any other way, I do believe is unrealistic and unhealthy, and probably lends itself to a morphed, changed, upgraded, downgraded eating disorder, like what you're talking about when it comes to social media. And that's the other thing. Social media is nothing in my eyes but a perfect petri dish to fuel unhealthy behaviors, and to, quite frankly, have exclusionary algorithms that don't benefit anybody but the top 1% of whoever is being looked at most in the world. And 9 times out of 10, that's cis white people. So I respond so greatly to everything that you just said, and that's why we call this a can of worms, everybody, because it is a can of worms. But speaking to the social media of it all, I want to refer back to James. Do you have any thoughts when it comes to social media and representation with eating disorders?
Yeah, I would just love to validate what Lynaé said, and like how you said you didn't want to, knock on anyone's journey that was in the fitness space, but also like using the ED as marketing. I do want to knock your journey. You do not deserve a platform if you are perpetuating harm. If you are a personal trainer who is capitalizing on your eating disorder in a way that is perpetuating orthorexia, that is perpetuating diet culture, that is perpetuating disordered eating, that is perpetuating restriction, binging, foods as morally superior to other foods, you are doing a disservice. You are the problem. You are the person who needs to look inside yourself and go, I am not healed. Lynaé, I think you're absolutely correct. And I am so grateful that you named that because it's so important. And what we've kind of gotten at here a little bit is how do we ever really recover from an eating disorder? And as we shift into the representation conversation, I want to share this fact that I learned from an Australian study from like 2010. And it said that 50% of people who recover, like medically recover from an eating disorder, 50% of those people don't exhibit any more intrusive thoughts that are ED related. And then the other 50% of those people do. We don't know which kind of 50% we're going to be. And then either way, even when you, like, for instance, I'm fully recovered from my eating disorder, right? I am not recovered from diet culture. I live in it. We will never recover from diet culture. We will always be inundated with those messages. And if, like, my responsibility as a fitness instructor and the representation there is to not make it about your body. It is not about what you look like. It's not about what you eat. It's about meeting you where you are. What does moving for joy look like for you? How are we addressing the ableism of the fitness industry? Like, how are we addressing the way in which all of us need different things for our bodies? Healing is something that looks like it's as different as there are people. The amount of versions of healing are the same amount of versions that there are humans on the earth. Like, and so when it comes to representation of this, I think part of the healing of this is, for me, not being othered, because we other eating disorders, just like, and Lynaé, you were pointing this out, everybody here has pointed this out, like, we look at it as if it's this thing that we're trying to fit the schema that we've built, the thin, cis white woman who was a dancer that's 17 and a perfectionist. And then we try to compare what we see in front of that to her. Even within the DSM, atypical anorexia only exists because of fat phobia. Atypical anorexia only exists because of fat phobia. And orthorexia doesn't exist in the DSM because we have not yet evolved to a place where we recognize that an unhealthy obsession with food is just as detrimental to our health mentally and physically as it is to restrict and binge and purge. Like, these are all things that are what we don't talk about enough, so that way when we talk about eating disorders, it becomes such a narrow scope that we try to fit people into these very, very narrow schemas that we've built for them based off the media narrative. So I think that when we're talking about them, instead of like looking at each other and trying to see if we fit the thing, then it's like, let's not other it. Most people we know have disordered eating. Most people we know struggle with their relationship with food. That does not make you bad or wrong. It does not make you guilty. It makes you a victim, or it makes you a survivor, whatever language you want to assign, I fully support. It makes you someone who's having a human experience with the diet culture that we all live in. And I think that the less we other and the more that we find the similarities and the less we thrust a cloud of shame on people who've experienced food problems. It's like, well, why can't you control it enough? Why can't you just do this? Like, weight loss worked for me. No, it didn't, number one. And there is nothing shameful about it because we all live in the same thing. We're all grappling with it in different ways, and probably ways that we like. If we have this panel again in 10 years, we're going to be like, oh, well, look at what I thought I knew then. You know, we're going to come back and realize how much we learned. And so the point is, like, it's not something to be othered. It's something to be embraced because it is a much more common experience than we realize.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, James. And it's funny because we say can of worms in a bad way, but this is also can of worms in a good way. We have a group of people here that I'm sure can talk about this to no end. So that brings me both joy and sadness that I have to help us move on a little bit. But I'd like to pose this question to each panelist. And if you find the words, I'd love to keep it succinct so I can get all of your words in. But what would your advice be to somebody that feels either marginalized, othered, whether it's because of their queerness, whether it's because of their background? What advice do you have when it comes to whether it be healing, seeking treatment, navigating treatment? I really want to leave this quite open-ended, but what advice essentially do you wish you had, or what do you wish you were armed with when starting your healing journey when it comes to relationships with food in your body? Anybody who feels ready, please jump in.
I could go.
Go for it.
The first thing that I would say is that you are enough. You're not too much. You're not too little. You are deserving of care and autonomy and being seen and validated and treated with kindness and humanity. And I would also say resources are out there and people are out there, and like, to queer it, I feel like there are the same way that we find queer family, we can absolutely find, queer or otherwise, there are numbers of us who are doing this work on the ground, who are finding providers who who are mindful of you and caring towards you and will not invalidate or disenfranchise you. There are so many people who have walked this path already, and you can look to them for advice. So find that family, queer or otherwise, in terms of really feeling like you've got support, you've got backing, because you're definitely not in it alone.
I'm muting because I want to make sure I'm listening. Yes, absolutely. And I love that you're literally covering a point that I wanted to throw in personally, which is community. I mean, community has been huge for me. And, you know, I remember even my first coffee date with it was such a, like a lightening, brightening experience in my life. And I mean that because it was somebody who all of a sudden spoke my language. So I can only imagine a future where more providers and more people in mental health care, as well as, you know, larger and larger communities of queer people, are able to kind of band together and find support. So thank you for bringing it up. Eric, give us some thoughts.
Oh gosh. First, I just want to say everybody on this panel is my superhero. Community. And Jen, who I think is a huge part of my community, said to me that the work that we are doing as anybody who is navigating this world of disordered eating and recovery, it's you are paving a way for people that has not been done before. You are absolutely the revolution, the change, and the needed change. And you are enough right where you are. I think that's the biggest thing. Is recovery is not about it. For me, it's never been about defining in terms of access to treatment or days. It has always been about learning to love and accept myself as enough right where I am, even if that's in struggle. And if you don't hear that from anyone else, hear it from me. It is not defined on whether or not you can afford a dietitian or a therapist or a fancy treatment center in New England with 10 beds and a giant, you know, quartz crystal to humdrum around. It is right here, right now. And you are always worthy to fight for your life. And any way you can find access to resources, you don't feel guilty. Grab them because you deserve it. Hang on to them and then give it away. Absolutely. It is unfortunately the system that we find ourselves in for now, and it's changing. So
Lynaé, give us some thoughts.
One, something that I lucked out, I really lucked out finding a nutritionist who actually specialized in eating disorders. Maybe that's point one. Not every nutritionist specializes in eating disorders. In fact, a lot of them don't. And so, you know, if you are reaching out for help, if you know that there's something going on with you, one, you know your body better than anybody else. You know yourself better than anybody else. So if you feel like there's something going on, if you feel like you have an eating disorder, definitely reach out, get help. Just know that not every nutritionist specializes in eating disorders. And so that in itself can be a bit of a struggle, but just keep saying it, keep raising your voice, keep saying it, keep, you know, doing what you need to do. I ended up finding a nutritionist similar to Eric for free. I lucked out when I moved to New York because I would always say when I was trying to get birth control, hey, the one thing you have to know is that I have an eating disorder and I'm not in treatment. So can you just, when you look for a birth control to put me on, can you just find one that doesn't cause weight gain, which is a whole other situation because modern medicine loves to still negate, like to cut off the link between weight gain and birth control, which is like maddening. But someone actually took me serious and made me talk to a nutritionist who specialized in eating disorders, and that's how I ended up getting treatment. The greatest thing that she told me was that at least helped me was this: your eating disorder is your body's way of trying to protect you. Because before that, I saw it as this thing I had to fight against, this like this alien that was inside of me that was like, what's wrong with me? And she explained it as it's your body's way of trying to protect you from the things that you can't control, from fear, from stress, from, you know, anxiety, from just whatever's outside of your control. It's not the healthiest way. And so we're going to find you healthier ways to deal with it. But just understand that at the root of it, at the core of it, your body, some part of you is trying to do the best that it knows how to take care of you in those moments. And it made me, I don't know, it just made me kind of be like, oh, okay, eating disorder, like, I got you. We're going to find better ways. But it made me shift from putting so much energy into fighting this part of myself, and instead of trying to like understand it and move forward in a way where it was like, okay, but thank you, and you've gotten me this far, but I'm going to take the reins and I'm going to take over, and let's do this a different way. So if it helps anyone to think of theirs that way, it really helped me to stop fighting myself. Yeah. And 3, just like everyone said, find your community, We're out there. You have a whole panel of people who are out there. So if you need someone, you know, find your community, find your people, and just know that at the end of the day, we're all still here. We're all still doing it. So it's very much possible. You can do a lot even if you don't find yourself in treatment right away, or you don't find yourself with a professional who can help you through right away. You can do it. You can do it. And the first step is knowing that there's something in you that, you know, that you need to acknowledge, and that you want to acknowledge, and you want to change. And once you know that, it's every single day, just every little bit at a time, every little win is still a win. So just keep going.
Yeah. Thank you, Lynaé. As usual, impressed. I bow down. James, we're coming up at a bit of a hard stop, so give us some final thoughts on what you think, what advice you wish you had, or of that nature.
Yeah, specifically for queer people, people in the LGBTQIA plus community, people who are questioning whether they belong in the LGBTQIA plus community. The word queerness means non-normative. It means going against the grain. It means to be different, right? And the reason that queer people were colonized out, like if you look at the history of Indigenous and Native Americans, the reason that queerness has been colonized out through genocide is because it is something that people don't understand. Because I think oftentimes people don't understand what is different than them. And in reality, I believe with my whole heart that queerness is a superpower. It is what makes us beautiful. It is what makes us unique. It is what makes us special. It is what makes us worth listening to. It is what makes us regular. It's also what makes us normal. It is not non-normative as the default. It is non-normative because of what's been constructed. And so we are trained to think that that's something that's wrong with us. And it's not. It is your superpower. There is something about your queerness that aches to be healed. It aches to honor the generations and the ancestors that came before us, and it aches to be liberated. And your healing is a part of that liberation. Your opportunity to say, something is going on and I need help, that is a radical act of love. That is a radical act of resistance against the very thing that tells you you don't deserve to get better, because you do. And I just wish somebody would have told me, so I'll say it to everyone else, there is always more about you that is beautiful than there is that is sick. There is always so much more about you that is beautiful and worthy, and so many more superpowers than the part of you that is sick. And the part of you that is sick can be healed. Eating disorders are preventable, they're completely treatable, and there are resources out there. And some of those resources are within you. We, of course, need people to hold our hands along the way, but as a queer person existing, you have already endured the generational trauma of trying to be colonized out, and you have survived, and you are going to survive this too.
Yes, ma'am, they, sir, absolutely. That was brilliant. I'm going to close us out really fast. Thank you, everybody who's been listening, for joining this very important discussion about eating disorders and body image within queer and other marginalized communities and communities everywhere. We hope that you enjoyed. Tune in throughout the week for more NEDA awareness roundtable talks. I personally am so grateful to be here. I'm nothing but honored and humbled to listen to all of your beautiful voices. It truly inspires me. I feel uplifted. So thank you for giving your time, and thank you for giving your wisdom. Everybody, please give a shout out about, again, your name and where people can find you on social media really fast. Jen?
Hi guys, I'm Jen Ponton, and you can find me at JenPonton.
Eric?
Hi, I am Eric. On social media, though, I'm Fonda, so you can find me at FKDrag.
Amazing. James?
I'm James Rose, and you can find me on Instagram and TikTok now as @JamesIsSmiling.
And Lynaé?
Hi everyone, again, Lynaé DuPriest, and you can find me on Instagram just as my name, Lynaé DuPriest. You don't have to put the accent over the E to find me.
Although I do love the accent. My name is Misha Oshirovich. You can find me on all platforms at Misha Oshirovich. I'm the only one in existence. Thank you all so much for being here. This was beautiful.